So what I'm thinking we're going to do, guys, is we're going to spend about 30 minutes talking about what's come up with a lot of questions. And remember when we did what's it called? What we do on Wednesday, Jesse? Is your audio back on?
Yeah, I'm back up now.
What's that thing called? Like micro brainstorm? What is that stuff we do the Wednesday of every meeting?
The lightning round?
Yeah. So lightning round, one of the subjects that came up was like rentals, when to buy them, where to buy them, whatnot. And so I was like, oh, I could offer some stuff on that. So I figured we spend about 30 minutes talking about rentals, where and when to buy them, and then talk about anything you guys need as far as what you left last meeting wanting to get done and what you're getting done right now, and see if Jesse and I can help you at all. So does that sound good?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I see head shaking.
What'd you say, Jesse?
I said I see head shaking, so that's a yes.
All right. And as always, when it's me teaching, I hate lecturing. I hate I hate quiet and responding. So Kirk, you're my co-host. Luke, you've been on enough calls like this with me, so take yourself off mute and feel free to pop off. So when I started thinking about doing this training, I think when you buy rentals, where you buy rentals is a dance, and I can't give you guys a straight line answer on any of it, because you can win so many ways in rentals that you need to have a decision-making criteria, but it's going to be a dance, and it's not going to be a straight line, and it's not going to be like, hey, just go do this. So does that make sense? Like when I buy rentals now, it is for at least 5 or 6 reasons at a certain time, and there'll be time I will buy rentals, and there'll be time I won't buy rentals. So does that make sense? So I'm not going to be able to give you guys a checklist on this calls. I'm just going to be able to give you guys things to consider. Is that in your experience, you agree with that, Kirk?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the struggles that we have, and we've been working on it this week and spent hours trying to figure it out and come up with an analyzation sheet so that when we buy a property, we figure out exactly how we want to do it. Do we want to do a rent own? Do we want to do a straight rental? Do we need to sell it for cash? Where's our cash needs at the time? And that's been I'm sure you guys are brighter than I am, but that's been a significant challenge to figure out when and where and what to keep and how the numbers actually make sense to break it down. And one of the things I found is the house, typically in our case, unless we need the cash, the house and the structure of the deal tells us whether it's a keeper or not based on the numbers. So
yep.
That's
so yeah, I'm going to talk to you guys about some of the lessons I've learned, some of the scars I've carried. I've had as much as 150 rentals at one time. Right now I'm at about 75. So hopefully you guys can learn from some of the mistakes I made. So here is everyone's target. Luke, what's your target right now? What do you want from rentals since you're a new guy?
As far as how many do I want, or what am I looking out of? As far
how many do you want, and how much passive income do you want a month?
Our target right now is 100 over the next 24 months.
100 doors?
100 doors over the next 24.
Okay. How much passive income do you want?
We haven't really looked at it like that personally. 20,000 plus a month, but that's not really what we don't look at that so much when we're buying them, just because of the strategy we use is a little different.
Right. So John, new guy, when you do buy and holds, how many rentals are you trying to get? How much passive income a month do you want?
Right now we're at 4 in Alabama. Hopefully we'll be at 9 in 7 days. We really look to keep anything that we can burr pretty easily right now.
Okay.
We're doing a lot of flips and we're pretty tight on cash.
And then how much passive income are you seeking?
I like that 20K a month number.
It never fails. I'm so glad you guys answered it for me.
Oh, there it is. That's funny.
Every new person in CG Premier, every new person in CG Select, they say, I want Jesse, would you back this up for me? Everybody's goal is 20K a month in passive income.
I see it pretty much on every other presentation. So yeah.
And so it's 20K passive income, however they're going to get there, plus 50 to 100 rentals. So this is everybody's goal. So by the end of this call, what I want is I want you guys to have a decision-making criteria of when you do start carrying on to that journey of the 20K a month and 50 to 100 doors. So that's what we're going to do today. Jimmy, what qualifies you to speak on this topic? I'm going to tell you guys my story and kind of show you why I'm qualified, because I pretty much did it all wrong. Last year I went on Trang's podcast, and Trang was like, so I don't know if you guys know my story, but I was in the Army for 5 years. Then I got out of the Army. I went straight into corporate sales, and Trang looked at me. He's like, so you got out of the Army, and then why didn't you just start straight wholesaling? And the answer is, I didn't know wholesaling existed. Like, I thought the only way you could get into real estate was through owning rentals. The way I got into real estate is I read Rich Dad Poor Dad in 2005 when I was in Iraq, and I started sending all my combat pay home. You don't pay taxes when you're overseas, and you're in the middle of the desert, so you can't spend money. And I was there for a year. And so for a 24-year-old kid, I came home from Iraq like rich. And so I partied a lot back then. So luckily I was able to send all that money back to my brother and mother, and we started buying rentals. And so I left the Army from deployments probably with like 6 rentals. So what I was trying to do was rush myself to that 20K of passive income a month. And so I started basically I bought 2 rentals a year for 10 years. And so I got out of the Army in 2008, started buying in 2005, but by 2015, I had 20 rentals. And then I learned how to raise private money. And in 2016, I bought 60 houses. In 2017, I bought another 50. So I was still working a corporate job. I didn't understand anything about systems, processes, property management, or anything. But since I had 100 doors, I qualified to get into CG. Like I've told Leon several times, I would have been much better served if CG Select existed back then, but it didn't. So I showed up to CG thinking I was awesome, because if you're in your local market and you own 100 rentals, like people think that's a big deal, right? At CG, it's like, hey, cool. Like that's, especially at Premier, it's like, cool. What else are you doing? And so my first meeting, like this was what I presented on. My first meeting was I had 102 single family houses. We did rent to own, and I just knew how to raise a bunch of private money, but I had no systems, no processes. And CG pointed out to me that I was house rich and cash poor. Like I had no reserves. So this is 2017 and 18. If I had executed this strategy in 2022, I'd be done. And so there was severe risk that I was carrying that I didn't understand until I went to CG, because I was chasing that 20K a month of passive income dream. And luckily, I had a great mentor named Jason Medley who kind of sat me down, and he's like, so what are you doing, bro? And I'm like, oh, I got 100 rentals. And he's like, no, what are you doing? How do you make money? And I had a partner at the time, and he's like, I know the math here. I know that you're not making any money. And so I still had a medical gig that I was taking some cash home. That was really paying my bills. But he's like, he pointed out to me that I had to put my money hand out there, and I needed to start making some active income. And I teach this in cash flow tactics all the time to my passive buyers. But if you guys have pen and paper, write this down. Jason says a lot of wise thing. His wisest thing he says is making money is easy, keeping it is discipline. But the second thing he says is this: passive income comes after hyperactive, active income. And like, this is what I'm teaching people in cash flow tactics, like passive and W2 passive investors, is if they want to buy more passive income, what do I always say, Luke? Do I not say this all the time to them? But like, so these are doctors, lawyers, sales professionals. And it's like, if you want to buy more rentals and have more passive income, you have to make more money actively. You have to hyperactively make active income. So I bring this up because if you're making the same mistake as I do, is like, hey, I'm just going to buy as many rentals as possible, put myself in a poor cash position, and the monthly cash flow will take care of me, especially if I'm using leverage. That will not happen. Kirk, in your experience, do you agree with that?
100%. I mean, we've got to buy smart ones that make great cash flow and not put ourselves in a bad situation. I've had hundreds of them through the years, and I would make some mistakes, and I had to sell them off and get the cash to get smarter. And
So-
I'd love for you guys not to do that.
So your main issue was you weren't liquid enough, correct?
Absolutely. And then I started out buying stuff that I shouldn't have bought, not realizing what it really cost to maintain them and cover the overhead and that stuff. And like a lot of folks think, well, if you can make a couple hundred a month, you're good to go. Well, from my perspective, that depending on how the deal's structured, that could be a train wreck.
Right. And so the reason I was so nervous when I showed up to CG is I just clearly wasn't liquid enough. If I had a massive rash of tenants moving out, I would have been dead in the water if I hadn't learned how to make active income from real estate. And so, now I've owned that portfolio so it's 2017, going on 6 years. Like, I've paid the mortgages down. I had them on 15-year notes. So I'm like getting close to halfway through the amortization. And I bought them at a wholesale price. And so like I got $3 million worth of equity. Consistently, it kicks off 6 figures in profit every year, that portfolio. So like it was a phenomenal thing to do. What I realized, like they were a great investment. What I realized is it's an order of operations that I hands down believe what I'm selling to my investors clearly is the greatest wealth producer in American history. Like owning rentals is clearly a great way to build wealth. Like it's tested, time tested over and over again. But to go out, like when I get nervous when I'm running a room and somebody gives their presentation, what they're trying to do this year, and they're like, I want to buy 100 rentals and I want to have 20K a month in passive income, and they don't have a plan to make active income and grow their liquidity, I get very nervous. And so that's why I kind of wanted to talk to you guys about this, because I'll never be in a room and recommend anybody goes out and tries to buy 100 rentals, especially right now at 7% interest rates. And the other advantage I had when I was buying in 16 and 17 is St. Louis was still coming out of the Great Recession. So lesson learned is rentals are the greatest wealth producer ever, but it's an order of operations issue of when you buy them. And so now I'm going to go through a few thoughts of how do you start thinking about this and how do you start figuring it out? Has anybody ever heard of this book? Other than you, Luke. Have you read this book, Jesse?
I got it after you spoke about it, but I didn't actually read it yet.
Well, you did listen to it, right?
Yeah, I listened to it.
It's a hilarious, is it not it's a hilarious money audiobook.
Yeah, it's got some good lessons in there. So
what was your main takeaway?
my main takeaway, that's a good question.
Gotcha.
Put me on the spot.
Well, Jesse's thinking, if you guys have any questions, just pop off with them or throw them in the chat. Keep thinking on it, Jesse. So I'm going to give you guys my greatest takeaway from this book. And I highly recommend this book. It's a hilarious audiobook while you guys are running or lifting to listen to. But it's about a trader on Wall Street who his name's Jim Paul. Now, Brendan Moynihan is he's an economist. And so you got this big meathead, excited trader. And this is kind of how our education company works is my partner is a accountant, economist guy. And then I'm like kind of the big meathead running around, making mistakes, figuring things out. And then Brad comes in and analyzes it from an economic point of view. But this Jim Paul guy, he would make $1 million and then lose $1 million, make $1 million, lose $1 million fast. And he didn't understand why it kept happening to him. And then Brendan Moynihan is analyzing it and talking about clearly, logically, why he was making these mistakes. So it's a fascinating book. But what this book crystallized for me is anybody ever confused like a landlord who owns 100 rentals and a guy who wholesales 100 deals a year and then a guy who flips 100 deals a year? They're all called real estate investors. Does that Does that ever seem odd to anybody?
Yes.
Why does it seem odd, Kirk?
Well, because you're not a real estate investor, you got a job and you're pushing a wheelbarrow. If you take your hands off the handle, it stops working. I mean, it's not working while you're not, or at least that's in place.
Anybody else ever questioned that idea? So this book, because I always wondered that too, because I didn't understand really what wholesaling was. And then I'd see an ad or a rich dad seminar saying, come be a real estate investor, and they'd be teaching you how to flip. And I'm like, that's interesting. And so this book kind of gave me a little clarity on this. So what this book did is it broke down certain definitions, and I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan, and rule 6 is always, I'm joking. Rule 6 for 12 rules for life is be precise in your speech. So I'm bringing this up to give us the ability to be precise in our speech. So here, according to that book, is the definition of investing. Investing is parting with capital in the expectation of safety and principal and an adequate return on the capital in the form of dividends, interest, or rent. Since the return of capital takes the form of periodic payments of interest or dividends, investing indicates an intention to be separated from the capital for an extended period of time. Therefore, investing is usually associated with a relatively long time horizon. We'll talk about it in a second, but just keep that definition in your mind. And so that logo on the right, that is the entity I hold rentals in. So all my rentals are in an entity called Joint Ops Properties. So I believe when I own a rental, I'm investing. This logo here on the right is our wholesaling company, iBuySTL. So here is the definition of trading. So trading is basically an activity in which someone, usually called a dealer or maybe a wholesaler, makes a market in a given financial instrument. Traders try to extract a bid-ask spread from the market. The trader essentially tries to stay net flat, neither long nor short, and makes money by extracting the bid-ask spread. The bid-ask spread, does that sound, what do you guys think that means in real estate language?
Profit or the wholesale fee?
Yeah, the assignment fee, right?
Yeah, assignment fee.
So like our goal, especially is when we're novating, is so by staying long, that means if we're talking Wall Street, that means buying the asset. If it's short, it means shorting the asset. Not really a good real estate equivalent. But I think when we are wholesaling, we're traders. It's not a right or wrong with it. It's just we're trying to extract assignment fees. We're not trying to buy anything. We want our cash as fast as possible. Does that make sense? So then we have the definition of speculating. So Vreeland Capital, the entity I flip houses out of. So speculating in its simplest form is buying for resale rather than for use or income, as in the case of commodities or financial instruments. Respectively, speculating is parting with capital with the expectation of capital appreciation. So I believe when I flip a house that I am departing with capital because I bought it at price A. I'm going to put a certain amount of capital into the house. That's the B, and then I'll sell it for price C. And then the profit is C minus A and B. So I would say when I'm flipping houses, I'm not investing, I'm speculating. And now I don't want everybody to get wrapped around the axle as far as terms. Like when I'm building a team to do this, I'm definitely investing. When I'm spending time in leadership or spending time building systems and processes, definitely investing. But particular to the asset, this book gave me a lot of clarity on what actual investing is and when and why to do it. He also gets into betting. It's really not prevalent to this talk, but there's a lot of confusion around this word of investing. And so I would say Facebook and Instagram and the media's definition of investing is parting with capital by any means of getting the original principal back plus some more, regardless of the risk the original capital was subjected to. The problem with the media's definition, if you hear somebody I got a 50% return, that's not the important question. The important question is what risk was that capital subjected to? And that's kind of this is kind of outside the scope of this call, but Investing assumes in managing risks that already exist. It's not betting. It's not gambling. It's not about being right. It's about parting with capital for a long period of time and making an adequate return. And so when I file my tax returns, does anybody here know the IRS treats not all income to the IRS is the same. They have two designations, active and passive. Is everybody aware of that?
Yeah.
So in my tax return, when I'm wholesaling and I'm flipping that back to that active income Medley was talking about, it's taxed a different way than the passive income is taxed. So that's important to remember once we get into why to buy rentals. But remember, for Medley, hyperactive activity creates the passive income one day. I know I'm throwing a lot of books out at you guys. Anybody ever heard of this book, Creating Wealth by Robert Allen? Like this is original OG before Robert Kiyosaki type stuff. But like this is the original book on BRRRRs. So what Robert Allen did is he got challenged by a newspaper article to see if he could essentially flip a house with no money. So they flew him to San Francisco. He had no money. And the guy eventually traded his way through wholesaling into being able to flip 10 houses with no money. But basically he walked around back in that day with newspaper ads, bought or got distressed assets under contract and then sold them and took the bid ask spread or the assignment fee. And so what Robert Allen in this book, he describes to people, what you do is you wholesale for a time period and then you buy 2 houses a year for 10 years. So cash flow tactics, where we have buyers who have a lot of active income, this is our plan for most of them, is to buy 2 houses a year for 10 years, as long as they have that active income. Where they're different from us as business owners is our income can be somewhat inconsistent, where a doctor, a lawyer, a sales professional, their income's fairly consistent. But creating wealth is basically buying 2 houses a year for 10 years. At year 10, you sell the first 10 and pay off the back 10. And then you basically had a minimum, especially if you live in the Midwest, you have $10,000 a month of passive income. So you're halfway there to everybody's goal of 20,000. Anybody else heard of this book, Richest Man in Babylon? I can't see your name. Is that, DT? What was your main takeaway from Richest Man in Babylon?
I like just basically the rules and the laws of money, how to treat it right. One of the big things that I took away from it is try to live on 70% of your income or less, always paying yourself first. And then also if you have any debt, utilizing, roughly around 20% of that income to pay off debt. So I've been trying to do the same theory in our business, paying our company first until we have enough reserves in there that we both have 90 days of pay, if need be, sitting there in the bank for both of us. And then also taking the other 20%, paying down any credit card debt, but also starting to utilize that money to turn around and pay down actual chunks of mortgage, chunks of other things, because we're doing rent to own. So a little bit similar, that the rent to own model for us gives us some cash flow now because we get about 15K or more down to start. Then we get our monthlies and then we mark it up on the back end. So there's 3 avenues to actually capitalize on our properties. And we actually found a lender now based on your advising to stop giving away partnership. And actually we found a couple, obviously lenders, our model still works at 7.5% interest. We create a pretty good spread, $500 or more per door, and get anywhere from 15 to 30K down on the front end.
Beautiful. And then, so explain to the group what pay yourself first means.
So basically, with Richest Man in Babylon, his whole theory was pay yourself first. So essentially get to your point where you're comfortable. That was how I took it. Get to the point where you're comfortable. For me, it's like 90 days cash reserve. I feel if I lost my job, I could find something that pays the bills in 90 days or less. I've had sales experience. I can pick up a door-to-door sales job tomorrow if need be, right?
Yep.
So that was kind of my model with it. And then anything over that, you took your pay yourself first, and then you started finding a way to invest it. How do I make that money start making money for me? So you're not just putting into reserves. And the biggest takeaway for me was if you can finally get to the point where debt was paid down, you're putting 30% of your income into investments. And now I like the one phrase, your money starts making babies and grandbabies and great grandbabies.
Yep.
And you're not doing anything for it.
Yeah. So I'm going to put just a qualification on debt. And like we teach some cash flow tactics, but there's good debt and bad debt. So good debt is debt that is backed by an asset. For example, a mortgage on a house where you're like 60% loan to value. Bad debt is credit card debt that you're going to the bars with, that you're using for vacations. That's harvesting before you reap. And so when you get to the point where your bad debt is paid off, then you start acquiring more good debt, which it sounds like you're doing with your lease to rent deals.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I kind of believe is the best strategy is a combination of the Robert Allen method, creating wealth, plus the richest man in Babylon. I'm going to kind of get there. Because here's the bottom line, guys. I'm not sure every wholesaler I interact with actually understands why real estate is such a great investment. I know for a fact most dispo agents don't understand why real estate's the greatest wealth producer of all time. Kirk, would you agree with that claim?
Yeah, absolutely. What I understood from years ago, and I don't know where I got it, but there've been more wealth made in real estate than anything in the world. But typically the people that had made the greatest wealth in real estate weren't actually in the real estate business. They were doctors, lawyers, and business owners, and they took wealth from somewhere else, all their extra income, and put it into real estate. The way we determine whether it's good debt or bad debt, good debt is when somebody else is making the payment. Bad debt's when I'm making the payment.
Right. Yeah, and I'll get into it when we talk about leverage, but like you're not going to get wealthy without using leverage, especially in an inflationary environment. But so, when I didn't even understand this. I had 100 rentals and I had to have my business partner, Brad, explain to me how real estate actually works. So, right now, like most people buy rentals for cash flow, and I don't really agree with that paradigm, even when interest rates were zero. So I'm going to kind of take you through the 4 ways you win. So thinking this in your mind, hey, I do want that 20K passive a month. I do want to build a rental portfolio. So I'm just going to take you guys really quickly on how you win owning rentals. Because like I said, I love my rentals. They're clearly building my wealth. Like when I have those 75 paid off and my original 50, I think I'm like 30% loan to value. So I'm very close to getting my original 50 paid off. And then that is truly mailbox money for me and my wife. And I can still flip a few if I want to. So there's difference between building wealth and paying your paycheck this month and building your reserves. And so cash flow is strictly the permission slip to put these assets on your balance sheet. You don't want to be robbing cash from your business for a make ready. Or let's say you have a house that it doesn't cash flow at all. You don't want to be taking active income from your businesses and feeding that meter every month. So you need cash flow as a permission slip that, hey, I can put this passive entity away and not think about it. I look at my rental books 4 times a year. I don't think about it. I don't worry about it. I know that the tenants are paying the mortgage down and that the net worth growing every month. And then every 90 days, I look at the cash flow and it makes me happy because I didn't have to work for it. But you got to understand, I've owned these assets for 6 years. So the rent bumped every year and the mortgage has gotten paid down. I see people get too excited or too dark on the first year if they're not getting their $200 a month every month. Like you got to let these things season, but don't buy an asset that you're going to have to pay. Especially right now, as you guys are building businesses, cash is so important to you right now. You don't want to be buying assets that you have to feed the meter with every month. Does that make sense? Like DT, am I explaining this correctly? You own rentals.
Yeah, definitely. The one thing that we had to we hit the bump in the road because there was some like refinancing and sometimes you had to bring money down to the table to buy the property and that type of stuff. So at first when we were between private money and hard money and bank money, we had to really buffer that into. So in our mind, we were sitting there like, oh, we're tapping into our actual active income to make everything work. And I was like, this isn't going to work, dude. Like we're starving over here doing that. So we had to flip that switch around. Yes. You got to have, we're starting to do the same thing where we're just able to start forgetting about that cash flow coming in each month. It's paying down the mortgage principals. And so, yeah, I think you're back to the richest man in Babylon. You're talking about how to cure a lean purse for sure.
Yeah. And so you guys, because that's why I get nervous when I'm moderating a room and somebody's like, I want to get 100 rentals. And I'm like, you're not liquid enough. No way. And I'm not able in the room to explain that because this is a dance. Because you're like, the pro forma says this, I should be getting this. I'll be fine cash flow wise. And like, maybe you don't know. And so, we were just talking about, for business owners, cash is king. Like my passive buyers in cash flow tactics, they're in a different situation. They have too much cash and they need to get their money. They're at the richest man in Babylon point where their debt's paid off. They got that their money needs to start making other babies. And they don't have a button to push like we do as business owners. Like we just work harder in our businesses and we're able to make money babies. Corporate employee, I've lived this, I know this, they're not able to do that. So cash, I always have everybody in Cash Flow Tactics have $5,000 in reserve for every rental, but it's even more important for business owners where we have, liquidity's the blood of our companies. Now, when I buy rentals every year, like I sit down with Marcus Krigler and Marcus says, here's your target for acquisitions of your own rentals this year. And it's because of taxes. And then I talked to Medley about this call this week. And Medley's like, these guys should only be buying rentals if they're making so much money in their active businesses, they're trying to lower their tax liability. Who here is familiar with what being a real estate professional gets you with the IRS? Jesse, do you know what this means?
I know you get a benefit on your taxes, but that's about it. You got to work so many hours on real estate activities, but I'm not sure what that looks like.
Okay. So I don't have time to do a history course, but guess what every founding father invested in?
Real estate.
Right.
Real estate.
And so it's not really a conspiracy because anybody who's paying attention knows this. But what did they set the whole system up to benefit?
Real estate.
Real estate.
Real estate investors. And God bless this country. It's the greatest tradition ever. And like, it's always worked like this. Like you get a farm, you'd inherit the farm, you'd grow the farm, and that's how you would retire. So it's always been like this for 300 years. But the IRS in their infinite wisdom, for no good reason whatsoever, us as real estate professionals, we're able to take passive losses off our active income. So my rental portfolio, we did a big cost seg. It lost 200. It appreciated, but it lost 200 grand on paper. And then I made, let's say I made 200 grand actively, and I have a $200,000 passive loss. What's my net tax liability?
Sounds like zero to me.
Zero. So like DT's, taking an active strategy where he acquires assets. He's got to monitor his cash, but he's put himself in a great tax position because of this privilege we get as real estate professionals. So back to what Medley said, a reason you guys might want to be picking up rentals is so you can keep more of your active income. Does that make sense? And like we have like this special dispensation from the government as real estate professionals. Like I keep referencing Cash Flow Tactics. So a lot of our clients, it's a sales guy making like $300K a year with a stay-at-home wife. What we then do is have their wife get their real estate agent. She becomes a real estate professional, and then they start saving money. They're making money in real estate and then saving their active money because they're real estate professionals. So the reason I buy rentals now is not for cash flow. It's to build wealth, and I get year one savings on taxes. Does everybody understand what depreciation means? Jesse, does everybody understand this or should I go into it?
We see him shaking, but I'm sure there's some people out there that do not, so you can go ahead.
So who's shaking their head yes, other than Kirk and DT?
Brandon.
Brandon, explain depreciation. I'm a participation guy, guys.
Yeah, so depreciation is just, its value goes down over time in terms of how it's used. So a depreciable asset is used over time, and so its value can go down over time, and the amount you're taking away from that asset is considered depreciation.
Well, this is the magic of real estate. So in 1913, when the income tax was created, factory owners and farmers were like, hey, dude, I'm losing money every year, but it's not a cash loss. My factory's clearly depreciating and losing value. My tractor, like when you buy a new car, it loses half its value as soon as you go off the lot, correct? A tractor's losing value every year. So they're like, Mr. IRS, we're losing money, but we can't take any credit for it. So they're like, okay, you're clearly losing money, so you can depreciate all these assets. What's the only asset class out there that depreciates to the IRS, but appreciates to the rest of the economy?
Real estate.
Real estate. That's why we are in the money pot. That's why we are the luckiest people on earth. This is why this is the greatest industry to be a part of, because for tax-wise, cars, everything else in real life depreciates, but our stuff to the IRS depreciates. And we say, oh, Mr. IRS, I'm so poor, you can't tax me. But in real life, it's appreciating. It's awesome. Like, what a country. Who would have thought this stuff up? Anyway, so once you get to a point where liquidity is not a huge issue and you have the business, the ability to support your business, then you can start picking up rentals in order to save money for taxes. Make sense? So you win long-term. We'll keep going into it. And then leverage. Leverage is a double-edged sword. It can kill you or it can make you wealthy. Kirk, what's the difference between somebody who knows how to borrow well and somebody who doesn't?
Whether you go bankrupt or not, or get wealthy.
Well, it's generally based on so I have a theory. Like if you look at 2008, I know you guys were all in like preschool in 2008, but if you look at 2008, all the houses that were foreclosed on in 2008 by 2020 doubled in value. So I'm like, wait a minute, it's not the real estate that failed. Something else must have failed in 2008. And my belief, it was the borrower's liquidity. And
Yes.
so that, going back to Medley is obsessed with all of us stashing cash. And it's because of that, because leverage is beautiful. It maximizes returns, but it can kill you too if you're not liquid enough, if you can't cover the gap. Does that make sense? But now here's the high side of leverage. We'll take a simple Midwest house. You buy and then Jesse, Brandon, you play along with me for this one. Brandon, if you want to buy a $100,000 house and you want a conventional 30-year loan, how much money you got to bring to the table?
Say that again.
How much? I want a 30-year fixed mortgage. And I have a $100,000 house. How much cash do I need to bring to the table?
Conventional loan, what is it, like 3%?
No, it's 20.
20%. 20 grand.
20 grand. Who's that,
Yes.
Jenny?
Don't call on me. I'm not good at math,
All right. No, you get to play this
but I
game
got the
now, too.
answer. I got the answer right.
So
Sorry,
yeah,
Brandon.
you bring 20,000 to the table. Now let's say the other scenario is I want to do Dave Ramsey. I'm going to buy this house with cash. And then you own that house for a year and it appreciates $5,000, 5%, right? So what is your rate of return if you're a cash buyer? The house went up $5,000 in value.
It's 5%.
What is your rate of return if you bought it with leverage?
Significantly more.
How much?
If you put down 20, how much?
5 times more.
25%.
Yeah, you got a 25% return.
Yes.
So leverage is beautiful. It amplifies your return. And like, quite frankly,
But I think it'll be fun.
if you're a professional, a W-2 professional, like you will never get wealthy with none of us, honestly, will probably get wealthy without using leverage, but you have to do it in a safe way. You have to do it in a responsible way. And the reason leverage works is because it amplifies your return. And since it's real estate, you get someone else to pay down your loan. Now we're in 2023. Interest rates are silly, but one door closes, another door opens. And that is the holy grail. Do you guys understand what non-recourse debt is? Jesse, what's non-recourse debt?
I'm gonna go after DT here. I'm gonna tag DT in here. I saw his head nodding.
So non-recourse debt is it basically doesn't fall back on the borrower.
You don't have
is
a
my
personal
understanding.
guarantee.
Nope.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
don't
have
have
a personal guarantee.
Yes. And so like a mentor of mine said, Jimmy, you can rack up this debt you're racking up with non-recourse debt. So private money, the reason I love private money, there's non-recourse debt, although I do stuff with banks. But the greatest explosion of non-recourse debt is hitting the market right now. Where's it at?
Roth IRAs?
Nope. Luke, where's all the non-recourse debt right now?
Seller financing.
Creative deals, baby. If you take over someone's loan on a subject to, where's the recourse debt?
It's on them,
On-
right?
On the seller. If you do any owner finance, you create the contract. You write in there, this will be non-recourse debt. So the danger right now in the economy, since creative deals are opening up, your greatest risk of leverage, you use leverage to amplifies your returns. And now if you can minimize the risk with non-recourse debt, you get as much of that stuff as you possibly can. And then the fourth way you win is with appreciation. And quite frankly, with the way the government's treating the dollar, destroying its value, these houses are cash flowing hedges. Like since 1950, the value of the median home price in the United States has doubled every 20 years. So you can bet on a 5% return pretty consistently, and you can also protect yourself from inflation. So those are the four ways you can win and mitigate your risk in rentals. And then, I will give you guys, do you guys want to know the secret to being a great real estate investor? Not a wholesaler, not a great flipper, but you guys want to know the secret. This isn't free. I'm going to give it to you for free right here. Do you want to know what it is? But I have to hear some enthusiasm on this call to give you.
Yes.
We're ready, yes.
Yeah.
Just do it for 10 years. There's too many factors going for your appreciation, cash flow, the tenant paying down the debt, and the tax savings that you can't be good at this. You can't mess it up if you can do it for 10 years. Like as your cash flow will continue to open up as your debt stays the same and gets paid down and the rents rise. So here's what I would do if I was a CG Select member and interested in growing my wealth through rentals. Not that everybody should be doing that, but instead of saying, hey, I'm going to go out there and get 100 rentals, I would say, hey, I'm going to do 2 creative deals a year for 10 years. And I guarantee you after that, you'll be happy and significantly wealthy.
Hey, Jimmy,
Yeah.
can I say a couple things about the creative deal I did? Because it backs up a lot of, it's a good example of a lot of the things that you talked about today. Do you mind if I run through that really quick?
Can we do it after we get to initial Q&A?
Yeah, for sure.
Anybody got any initial questions?
So Jimmy, quick question. So how much do you suggest like if you're purchasing your first rental, like how much should you have in a bank account, like liquid, that you just like as reserves for that first rental? Because I know like, there's things like, if the HVAC goes out or anything of that nature too.
5,000.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, so we'll do 100 make-readies this year in property management, and the good ones are $2,000, the bad ones are $5,000. So always always have your worst case scenario.
So for each rental you have, you've got 5K in the bank for that rental.
For the first 10.
Okay.
And then you can start, lower, because then you're going to get to the point where you have so much in reserve, but then you're not doing deals because you're just built. I'd say 50 grand at that point, you're pretty safe. Plus you have the reserves for your business. I would never, ever, ever sacrifice business reserves to start buying rentals.
Tim, go ahead. You're muted, or your audio isn't connected. John, you want to go while Tim's getting his audio figured out?
Yeah, check. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. So Jimmy, I live in Phoenix, hard to cash flow out here. I'm flying out to Philadelphia to go check out some rentals there. But would you ever was it a terrible idea to buy a rental in Phoenix here in an appreciating market that maybe doesn't cash flow or negative cash flow every month?
So this is what I'm talking about. It's a dance. It's hard for me to just answer that. There's so many factors big. How liquid are you in your business? How liquid are you personally? Are you okay with feeding the meter every month? How long do you think you'd be feeding the meter? What's your exit plan? Because, Doug Hopkins, he's in Premier. He's lived in Phoenix and he's owned his rentals for 20 years. And everybody knows that, hey, even Phoenix might be taking a little bit of a beating now. Everybody knows Phoenix comes back. But back to earlier in the call, you would definitely be speculating. Because you'd be there's nothing wrong with making your money on capital appreciation, but just know that's the other reason was that helpful bringing up the definitions, or was that like, what's Jimmy talking about?
Oh yeah, that helps out a lot. I mean, if I got into something like that 10-year play that you mentioned would be it, like it would only be in a really good area, good house, and I would have equity in it. But I'm looking at all these deals going, oh man, I'd lose or I break even or I'd lose $200 a month, and I'm thinking, hey, like you said, the situation depends. But if I set 15 grand aside or 20 grand and left it in that bank account to feed that meter, in my eyes, like, well, shit, that gets me through 3, 4, 5 years. I'm assuming that the price is going to go up, and then I don't know, but
what's the underlying? And then I'd also be asking, what's the underlying debt?
Well, I would probably do a typical cash out refi on it after the remodel, or is subject to deal or something.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to replace my entire rental portfolio with subject to debt. So let's say I was able to get $250,000 of subject to debt, I would instantly sell away $250,000 of my bank debt.
Is that just because it's non-recourse?
Hell yeah. That's the other thing you guys got to understand. You guys are in the game. I can't show my cash flow tactics buyers how to do what you can do with creative deals.
Question for you, and Jimmy, could you tell me a little bit more about what you meant when you said you will replace your creative debt, your bank debt, with the creative debt?
Well, let's just say I take on $250K of subject to debt, right? I would then go to my current list of rentals and sell off $250,000 of bank debt.
Oh, okay.
Because balance sheet wise, I'd probably be net even, but I'd have less risk, less personal risk. Because the other thing is I also want to keep taking on debt, guys, because inflation's at 8%. I don't want to lose money to inflation. So I got to keep building up that leverage balloon that as time goes on and the tenant pays down the mortgage over and over again and the house continues to appreciate, that's some true intergenerational wealth that can be created. But I wouldn't take business reserves to create that, saying, oh, my grandchild's going to be wealthy because of this. I wouldn't do that crap.
Tim, you want to go ahead?
Oh, yeah, you can hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, cool. Perfect. Thanks, guys. So two-part question though, Jimmy. We're talking about leverage from a different standpoint. So same time frame, 10 years. How much, or do you at all include the standpoint of yourself or maybe your clients, right? Looking at like multifamily assets, right? To kind of collapse that timeline over 10 years. Yes, not the bigger ones, 100 units, but versus, 10 units, 15 units, something, you still get the non-recourse debt, et cetera, if possible. Well, how often are you guys looking at like multifamily to kind of leverage that? Because 2 houses a year is good, but if I can do 110 unit a year, I might collapse that. That's one part. And if that doesn't work, the other part is if you're going to rent a portfolio system you have, are you looking to get most of your renters like in the same part of town in St. Louis, or are you doing like nationwide from a property management standpoint?
I'll answer the second question first. Property management, we're only in St. Louis. That, the brain damage it took to build St. Louis up, I don't know if I have the heart to do it in another city. Because it takes 300 units to be worth something. And then, so Tim, like you're in the game and get rich in your niche. So if you understand multifamily and you can get non-recourse debt in multifamily, like, hell yeah, you're an operator, right? But when I take a doctor or a lawyer and they're first learning about real estate, we generally recommend single family homes. But then like Luke took that recommendation, told us to shove it, and he went straight to multifamily. But like Luke, did the frames of the multifamily help you understand the frames of the single family? Did it help you understand the multifamily?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it still applies in a lot of different aspects to that.
Doc, what you got, man?
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna ask, oh yeah, property management. Yeah, when it comes to property management, that side of things. So I know you have your company, Jimmy.
Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to say to you guys. Until you get to 300 units, have somebody else do it.
Okay.
Because here's what you got to look at it. Like you spend an hour wholesaling, you probably make a lot more money than an hour, whatchamacallit.
Managing properties?
Yeah.
Where do you suggest us some vetting? Because I know we all hear your horror stories about bad property management companies. Or how do you feel like there's a good vetting process for identifying a good one?
It's a thankless job. So it would be, I would say, how responsive are they to you? How responsive are they to you? I actually have a property management checklist I can share with you guys. It's called the Turnkey Buyer Checklist that has all that criteria.
Oh yeah, can you share that, please?
Yeah.
Jimmy, just go ahead and send it to me. I'll put it in the Facebook group. Kirk, what you got?
I know when we're evaluating particular houses, whether we're going to keep them or sell them, we're looking at principal reduction, because some of our properties have $500 a month principal reduction. Some have $100 principal reduction. The other thing is, what is the net cash flow after taxes and insurance we're going to get? And what's the loan term? How many years are left on the loan? And we're looking at all those numbers to determine, which one's going to be the best one to keep and what the interest rate is. When you start evaluating that stuff, it's been greatly helpful to us. Jimmy talked earlier about, non-recourse loans. And one of the things I wanted to warn you guys about is, to my knowledge, all bank loans that we're going to go get are demand loans, because that works better for the bank for taxes. And what a demand loan means is that bank at any time, for any reason, can call that loan due. And when the bank gets in a situation like they did in 2008, and they're trying to survive, and they look at calling your loans due, you've always made your payment perfect, everything's perfect, but when they look at trying to get that money back from you to survive for them, guess who gets thrown under the bus? And they'll do that big time, and they did it during 2008. And so that become, even though you're dealing with Bob the banker, he loaned it straight to you, blah, blah, blah. Or even if he didn't, and it's non-recourse from the bank, it's still a demand loan. And if they get in a bind or management changes, they can call that loan due. That's why we try to do everything basically either subject to some kind of seller financing, because it's non-recourse and we're not dealing with somebody who's just going to call the loan due at any point. I just wrote some stuff down. Also, I'd encourage you guys on your rentals, if you make all your checks for all your repairs under $2,500, that becomes an expense in that particular year as opposed to over whatever it's going to be this year, 30-ish years. So in other words, if you wrote out that check, if you try to make all your checks less than $2,500, then you don't create what's called phantom income. And I don't know that we got time to go into that, but just consider that, writing all your checks for that, and you can expense it out in that particular year and take that just like you would depreciation, where it's a phantom deduction. Depreciation is a phantom deduction, which means that you're actually getting a deduction for something that's not real. And like what Jimmy was talking about, when you start getting huge phantom deductions that aren't really there, you didn't actually spend the money, but you're lowering your taxes sometimes dramatically. I know one of the things that we felt like was the safest bets for us is single family houses. If we get into a bind, we can retail our way out of that house. If we get into a bind, it is much harder to retail our way out of multi-unit stuff, because you're going to be selling to a sophisticated buyer who's going to want it at a discount. There's not that many of them. But when we have houses, if we need money, like I have through the years, I built up rentals and it was a savings account. And then when I needed it for different disasters in the last 35 years, then we just kind of cashed in some of those assets and kept going, and they were easy to cash in at retail. So that's just a few thoughts, Jimmy.
Yeah, that's a magic part of it. Like, let's say, because with that rental portfolio, I set a goal of 200 grand a year. And if I am not going to hit that goal every year, I sell something Q4. Like, equity does build over time.
Neve, we got one more question. You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you. Question for Jimmy. Two questions, actually, real brief. First of all, do you have any sort of personal buying criteria, certain red flags that you look for, at least in your market? And the second question is, if you were, to start building your portfolio today, start buying rentals, and you have a wholesale operation, let's say you're making less than 6 figures a month from that wholesale operation, and you wanted to choose between going the conventional financing route with your traditional like 20-30% down at today's rates, and hopefully pencils out, which means that you could refi later and it'll still pencil out, or would you go the hard money route?
I would go for creative deals. I'd be actively looking to add an owner finance deal or 2 owner finance deals or 2 sub-2 deals a year.
That's where the magic's going to be, guys, right now and in the future. It's being able to create lending without banks.
Like, you have such a distinct advantage. Like, you have such a distinct advantage right now to everybody else who's going to grow their wealth through real estate. Is that so? Like, the guy who heads my acquisitions department, Bobby, like, he's buying rentals strategically, and I'm trying to hook him up with the creative deals or Section 8 deals where he's very protected, very insulated. But I was just, he'll be like, isn't this a good rental? I just saw one of your buyers buy it. I'm like, it's a good rental for somebody who's not in the game. You're in the game. So, like, you need deep discounts and you need great financing. Otherwise, you're not doing your job well enough as an acquisitionist.
Yeah, guys, Kirk gave a great presentation at this last Q1 event in January. I put it in the chat there if you guys want to go back. It was phenomenal. It's like what happens in a market when the financing goes away, right? And how to protect yourself and a bunch of other things. But Kirk, I think you did a great job on that presentation. So I think people should go back and watch that.
Neve, the last creative deal I did, I got in for like $10,000 down. It's a 0% interest note, 15 years. I pay him $2,000 a month. That thing now, gross rents are like $130,000 a year. So, someone like you, you're in the game. Like, you can find deals like that. If it's 100% equity, they own it outright. Those are easier deals to find because a lot of those people aren't educated on as much as the people in this room are. Even though they might have hundreds and hundreds of rentals, they're still not as educated as the people in this room. So it's easier to structure a deal like that.
Got it.
But, recognize you guys have I also wanted you guys just to know you guys have these arrows in your quiver now. Like, you don't have to wholesale everything. Like, there's a high probability that I'm like 80 I look back at all the turnkeys I sold and I'm like, son of a bitch. I should have kept like 200 more of those.
That's my biggest regret, no doubt about it, is selling off, wholesaling for years and just giving away what was fantastic properties to pick up, 5, 10, 20, 30 grand right quick, and just was stealing property and then giving them away. And I thought I was a super smart guy. I look back and I thought, how dumb can you be? I was just giving away fantastic properties. So as you're looking at this stuff, you're wholesaling, go through, and if you can, cherry pick the cherries and sell off the pits, so to speak.
And create that target for yourself that I'm going to get good enough at creative finance that 1, I can find 2, and then 2, I can close 2.
That's our goal every month, is 50% we sell and 50% we try to keep. And we get close.
That's great, guys. Jimmy, appreciate you hopping on here. I think really the key takeaways for me is Jason Medley. He thinks he's bashed it into our brains, right? Cash is the oxygen of your business. And if you're sucking out all of the oxygen and putting it into rentals before you're ready, then that's the quickest way to go under. So Jimmy, I think you hit it on the head there. And I think my other takeaway is picking up 2 creative deals a year. I think that's a good goal for everyone to go 0 to 1, not necessarily 2 to 100, but 0 to 1. I think that's a great start. So,
and then I can't recommend, read the first chapter of Creating Wealth. That's all you really need, but what I learned losing $1 million will make you a better business owner and a better investor. Like, I can't recommend that book enough.
Can I say one last thing?
Go ahead.
In our particular business, this is the business theory that we have. We don't figure it out and go do it. We go do it and figure it out. Just go do it. You're not going to figure out and go do it. You're not going to get all the answers. You're not going to go study this and figure it all out and go do it. Just go do one. It's probably not going to kill you. Just do one and see what happens. Get in the game. Do you agree, Jimmy?
Yeah, I like plans. What are plans? Now, as I grew up and had to mature as a business owner, like, yeah, I have to plan. But it used to just be like, hey, there's a deal, go get it. And then that's how thank God for Jason Medley. I'd be in a van down by the river.
All right, guys. Well, we can cut off there. If you guys need anything else, pop in the Facebook group, shoot me an email. Happy to help you guys with whatever I can. All right, take care,
Thanks, guys. This was fun.